Let's begin. Welcome back for yet another beautiful story time reading coming to you live from the studio. It's your favorite cat, the host with the most, KittehKun. I have some interesting stories for you. As always, these stories are going to go up on the YouTube side of things once that is all said and done, so make sure to stick around and you will find out. So, one moment. Okay, there we go. That should be a lot better. Okay. So, our very first story starts off with a dragon, a kitsune, and an immortal. In the faraway land of Katsura, where the mountains kissed the sky and the rivers shimmered like silver veins, there was a tale that had been passed down through generations. It was a story of a dragon, a kitsune, and a mortal who found themselves caught in the dance between magic and destiny. High in the cliffs of the western peaks, a dragon by the name of Ryukara dwelled. His scales were the color of the midnight sky, shimmering with a faint silver hue, and his wings could eclipse the sun. But Ryukara was not just any dragon. He had once been a guardian of the land, a protector of the balance between the natural world and the spirit realm. Long ago, he had been cursed by the ancient deities after a terrible betrayal. The betrayal was not of his own doing, but one that had been orchestrated by a power beyond his understanding. As punishment, Ryukara was transformed into a stone statue, frozen in time, unable to speak or move. His immense power was sealed, and for centuries he lay dormant, forgotten by most except for a few wise souls who whispered of his existence. One night, during a rare lunar eclipse, the seal on his curse began to weaken. The moon's pale light fell upon Ryukara, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he had begun to stir. His eyes, once lifeless, now glimmered with the hint of consciousness. But to break the curse entirely, he needed something that had been lost for centuries, a soul pure enough to match his own. Far from the mountains, in the mystical forests of Ayakashi, lived a kitsune named Hishiko. She was known across the lands for her beauty, wisdom, and power. Hoshiko was a creature of great magic, a spirit who had lived for centuries, and her essence intertwined with the forest itself. Her fur shimmered like the stars, and her eyes held the secrets of the universe. Hoshiko had long known about Ryukara's curse, for the spirits of the land whispered to her. But she had never dared approach the dragon, for fear that the burden of his curse would be too great. Yet, as the lunar eclipse loomed closer, she felt an irresistible pull, a deep, insistent feeling that something important was about to happen. Her fox instincts told her that the balance of life and magic was shifting, and she couldn't ignore it no longer. One moonlit night, Hoshiko decided to seek out Ryukara. With a flick of her tail, she vanished into the mist of the forest, her form becoming one with the wind. She traveled swiftly across the land, guided by an unseen force, until she stood before the dragon, who now lay half awake, his massive wings twitching as if reaching for some freedom. Ryukara, Hoshiko called softly, her voice a melodic whisper carried by the wind. You have awakened, but you are still bound by the chains of your past. Ryukara's deep voice rumbled in response. I cannot break free alone. The curse that requires a soul to release me. Hoshiko, with her vast knowledge, knew exactly what he meant. The soul he needed was one that was selfless, pure, and untouched by malice. But such souls were rare in the mortal world, and yet Hoshiko believed in the goodness of people, and so she decided to venture into the human realm. Far from the mystical forests and towering mountains, there lived a young mortal named Akira. He was a simple man, kind-hearted, humble, and driven by a deep sense of justice. He had grown up in a small village near the edge of the forest, where he had spent his long days helping his neighbors and seeking peace in the quiet moments of his life. Akira was not wealthy, nor did he seek fame, but there was a purity in his soul that drew the attention of those beyond the mortal realm. One evening, as Akira wandered through the forest, lost in thought, he stumbled upon an unusual sight. A fox with 9 glowing tails stood before him, its eyes as bright as the stars themselves. Who are you? Akira asked, startled but unafraid. I am Hoshiko, a kitsune of this forest, the fox replied, her voice both soft and powerful. I have come to ask a great favor of you, mortal. Akira's heart beat faster as he listened to her words. Hoshiko explained Ryukara's curse and the dragon's need for a pure soul to free him from his stone prison. Only a heart unattained by malice can break the chains that bind him. Akira was hesitant. He had heard of dragons, great creatures of fire and fury, but he knew nothing of curses or magic. Yet he could not deny the sincerity in Hoshiko's eyes. He could feel that something was at stake. He looked at Hoshiko and asked, "How can I help?" And Hoshiko just smiled gently. You must offer your soul, Akira. Your selflessness and pure heart are the key, but know this, your life will never be the same. You may lose what you hold most dear. Without hesitation, Akira nodded. He had lived a quiet life, and his deepest desire was to see the world live in peace. If his soul could be the key to freeing a creature of legend, then so be it. With Hoshiko's guidance, Akira traveled to the heart of the western peaks. There, he met Ryukara face to face. The sight of the dragon, immense and powerful, filled him with awe. Yet, he did not flinch, and he had made his choice. I offer my soul, Akira declared, stepping forward. Ryukara's eyes flickered with recognition, and the ground beneath them trembled. You are the one, the dragon mumbled, his voice deep and resonant. Your purity, it is what I needed. With a single, graceful motion, Hoshiko's tails brushed against Akira's forehead, and the magic of the forest enveloped him. A gentle glow surrounded Akira, and he felt a sudden surge of energy. The curse that bound Ryukara for so long began to unravel thread by thread. The dragon's wings unfurled, and his mighty roar shook the heavens. But in that moment, Akira felt no fear. He knew he had made the right choice. He had given his soul for the greater good, and now the land would be free. As Ryukara soared into the skies, the balance between the realms was restored, and Akira, though no longer mortal, became a part of something greater. His essence woven into the fabric of the world itself, a guardian spirit who would watch over the land for eternity. Hoshiko, with a final smile, vanished into the forest, knowing that the balance had long been preserved. And so the tale of the dragon, the kitsune, and the mortal became a legend. A story of sacrifice, purity, and the magic that binds all the creatures as one. You are enough just as you are. Every day is a chance to embrace your inner strength and be proud of how far you've come. Welcome into the stream, Ian. I hope you've been doing fantastic today on this super rainy Wednesday. As you can see, we changed gears just a little bit to reincorporate Storytime Saturday into our routine, to catch up on all the lost moments that we lost due to Storytime Saturday. So if you like stories, if you like reading, if you like, doing things in the background, this is the stream for you. And that's good that you're doing good. Hell yeah. You are deserving of love and kindness and all the good things that flow into your life. Let go of any doubt and let love fill your heart. Coming in with hydrate, I got you. Cheers. Oh shit, you heard that. Oops. Let's go ahead and get this next story started. Alright. 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 Change that to root beer. If only I had some root beer. The closest thing I got to me right now is Mexican Sprite. I've already had like 3 bottles of it though. Over like the past few days, right? Nothing like all in one, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, this shit is getting just a little bit ridiculous. Maybe I should lay off of it, you know what I'm saying? Lay off the Sprite. Before we start this next one, you are enough. And I believe in you. You have the courage to face any challenge and the wisdom to move through life with grace. And maybe, yeah, maybe just maybe, gotta put it off just to not feel like I'm just drinking straight sugar. It's so good though. This is the song Beneath the Roots. And let me actually drink one more time. Okay, let's begin. In the heart of the elder tree forest, where sunlight filtered through a ceiling of jade green leaves, a lone bard named Kylam wandered the overgrown path. His cloak was worn, his lute scratched from years of travel, but his voice remained clear as mountain air. Kylam had lived a life on the road, moving from village to village, singing for coin company. He had no true home, only the stories he'd gathered and the songs he carried. But lately, something had changed. A strange melody had begun to haunt his dreams, a delicate, melancholic tune that seemed to echo beneath the earth itself. It called to him, pulling him deeper into the forest. The deeper he ventured, the more the melody sharpened. It was not a threatening sound, but it was in fact lonely. On the third night of his wandering, Kylam came upon an ancient tree unlike any other. Its bark shimmered under the moonlight, silver veins pulsing faintly beneath the surface. Its roots stretched wide, twisting through the earth like the fingers of a sleeping giant. He knelt before the tree and placed a hand on the rough bark. "Who sings?" Kylam whispered. The tree's roots trembled beneath his hand, and then a voice, soft and haunting, answered from beneath the earth. "Come closer, traveler. Come and find me." The ground beneath him cracked, roots twisting and parting. A stone stairway Come never. A stone stairway unfurled from the earth, spiraling down into darkness. Kylam hesitated only for a moment, but before taking the first step. The stairway led him into a vast cavern beneath the tree. Starlight spilled through cracks in the stone ceiling above, illuminating an ancient hall carved from the very roots of the forest. Vines curled along the walls, and in the center of the chamber sat a figure upon a stone throne. She was beautiful, but strange. Her skin was pale, like polished moonstone, and her hair cascaded in dark waves, adorned with small white flowers. Her eyes, bright silver, reflected Kylam's face as he approached. "Who are you?" Kylam asked. "I am Lysara," she said. Her voice resonated like distant chimes in the wind. "I am Lysara, the last of the Rootborn. This place, this kingdom beneath the roots, was once a thriving sanctuary, but long ago it was cursed. The forest spirits fled, and I was left alone." "And the song?" Kylam asked. "The one in my dreams?" Lysara's lips curled into a faint smile. "I was calling to you. I need you, Bard, for only music can break the curse that holds this place captive." Kylam frowned. How can a song break a curse? Music is not just sound, for it is life. My people were bound to this forest through song and harmony. When the curse fell, the music was stolen, and so was our power. If you can weave the right melody, you may be able to awaken the heart of the forest. Kylam sat before her throne. His fingers brushed over the strings of his lute. He wasn't sure how to create the song she asked for, but he can feel it lingering beneath the surface of his mind. "May I hear the melody again?" he asked. Lysara leaned forward and placed a hand on his chest. A spark of light passed between them, and the haunting tune from his dreams blossomed in his mind. He closed his eyes and began to play. The sound was soft at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. It grew, weaving through the air, and the roots of the tree above began to shimmer. Lysara's eyes widened. Yes, that's it. Kayam's fingers moved faster, the song growing richer as the cavern filled with light. And then, a crack. The stone beneath them rumbled. Lysara's eyes flashed with alarm. Wait. Something is wrong. The melody twisted, and the ground beneath Kylam split apart as thorn vines shot from the earth. A deep, guttural growl resonated from the depths of the caverns. Someone else heard the song, Lysara whispered. From the shadows, a pair of red eyes glowed. A figure emerged, tall and gaunt, its body twisted and covered in bark and thorns. Its mouth stretched wide into a cruel smile. "The curse was never meant to be broken," it said. "And now you've woken something that should have stayed asleep for eons." Kylam's lute trembled in his hands, and Lysara stood, her pale skin glowing faintly. "Kylam, finish the song," she shouted. "How?" Kylam yelled. "Follow your heart." Kylam closed his eyes and began to play again, but this time the melody was his own. It wasn't haunting or mournful. It was fierce and bright. The cavern pulsed with golden glow, and Lysara raised her hands, vines unraveling from her wrist as energy surged through her. The dark figure screamed as the light crashed down on it. Its form dissolved into ash and smoke, and the cavern walls shook with a final deafening crack. When the light faded, Lysara stood before Kylam, her silver eyes soft with wonder. "You did it," she whispered, and Kylam lowered his lute, his chest heaving. "I think we did it together," he replied. Lysara smiled. "Stay with me, Bard. Let us build a new song together." Kylam took her hand, feeling warmth pulse beneath her skin. "I think I'd like that." And so, the Bard and the Rootborn Queen stood beneath the ancient tree, their music echoing through the heart of the forest, a song not of loss, but of renewal. And that was the story of the Bard and the cavern. Every step you take brings you closer to your goals, and if you keep believing in yourself, the universe will support you on your path. In this moment, you are worthy of peace and relaxation and all the positive energy the universe has to offer. Trust yourself because you're exactly where you need to be. Let's go ahead and get the next story ready, and then we'll begin. Hopefully everyone is having a beautiful Wednesday so far. Wednesdays are always an interesting time of the week. Wednesdays are half the week is done, but half the week is still yet to come. My personal absolute worst day of the week is Tuesdays. Mondays, whatever, it's the start of the week. But Tuesdays are just a little too goofy. When you really think about it, Tuesday is far. It's far from the weekend. Monday isn't so bad when you think about it like that. Monday begins a new beginning, whereas Tuesday you must sustain. Wednesday, things are almost done, and Thursday, it's a day before Friday. Friday is the end of the week, and thus you get to begin your weekend. Your relaxation, your weekend. Everything that makes a good week good. Alright. Let's go ahead and hydrate here. The drink of choice today is a apple juice. You know, I just realized this doesn't have any vitamin C. Interesting. You would think that apple juice would have vitamin C, but it doesn't. Oops. Okay. Let us begin the next one. The Curse of Hollow Spire Keep. A crackling fire flickered in the dimly lit tavern, casting long shadows over the rough wooden walls. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows, and the faint hum of lute music drifted through the smoky air. Seated around a battered oak table were 4 adventurers, drawn together by fate, or perhaps misfortune. Captain Torrin Blackthorn leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the edge of the table. His crimson cloak was faded, but the gleam of his polished longsword at his side showed he was no ordinary sellsword. His dark eyes scanned the room with the wariness of a man who had fought and survived more battles than he had cared for. If you ask me, Torrin drawled, this whole thing sounds like a suicide mission. Across from him, Elira Moonwhisper, a lithe elf with silver hair cascading over her shoulders. She rolled her eyes. Her leather armor clung to her frame, and her twin daggers gleamed under the candlelight. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you come all this way just to whine about how dangerous it is? Because if you'd rather crawl back to whatever hole you came from, now's the time. Torrin scowled, I'm just saying that venturing into a cursed keep to recover a forbidden artifact doesn't exactly scream a good plan. Brax's Stoneheart, the hulking dwarf cleric at the end of the table, chuckled deeply. His beard was thick, braided with small iron rings. His chainmail clinked softly as he leaned forward. Aye, but the pay's good, and the gods have blessed our cause. He lifted a tankard and took a long swig of old ale. Besides, if it were easy, the town guard would have handled it by now. If the gods have blessed this cause, then why does it feel like a death sentence? Torn muttered. At the far end of the table, Kale Valerin sat silently. His dark hood was drawn low, hiding all but the glint of his amber eyes. A rogue by trade. Kale's reputation was whispered through the underworld. There was no door he couldn't pick and no pocket he couldn't empty. You're all missing the point, Kale said softly, his voice low and sharp. The artifact isn't the problem. The keep itself is alive. I've heard stories, adventurers vanishing without a trace. Entire patrols swallowed by the walls. If we go in there, we'll be playing by its rules. Alara's smile sharpened. Then we'll just have to break the rules. Two days later, the party stood before the looming gates of Hollowspire Keep. Thick fog rolled over the jagged stone walls, and thorn vines choked the ancient iron gate. The air was thick with rot and stagnant magic. Charming, Torrance said, drawing his sword with a hiss of steel. Braxis raised his holy symbol and muttered a quiet prayer. A faint glow radiated from his palm, driving back some of the fog. All right then, Elara said, spinning her daggers between her fingers. Let's find this artifact and get out before the walls eat us. The gate groaned open as Braxis pushed it aside, and they stepped into the darkened courtyard. Towering spires rose on either side of them, and narrow windows stared down like hollow eyes. I don't like this, Kale murmured. Noted, Torrin replied. Suddenly, the doors to the keep creaked open on their own. Of course they did, Torrin muttered. Well, shall we? They entered a grand hall lined with rotting banners. The walls were cracked, the stones stained with old blood, and the air was cold, unnaturally cold. Torrin's breath curled in the air like smoke. This place is wrong, Kale whispered. Then they heard it, a low scraping sound. Shields up, Braxis shouted. A dark shape unfurled from the shadows at the far end of the hall. A figure in rusted armor, skeletal hands wrapped around a jagged sword. Its hollow eye sockets burned with a sickly green glow. Who disturbs the Lord of Hollowspire? The knight raised its sword, and 6 more figures emerged from the shadows behind it. Well, Torrance sighed, raising his sword. At least we know where the guards are. Elira grinned. It's about damn time. And Braxis raised his warhammer. Light protect us. The skeletal knight charged. Torin parried the first blow, steel sparking as his blade met the jagged edge of the knight's sword. Elira flipped over Torin's shoulders, driving her daggers into the exposed gaps in the knight's armor. The creature howled and backhanded her across the room. "Elira!" Torin shouted. Braxis's hammer crackled with divine energy as he slammed it into the chest of another knight, shattering bone and metal. Kale darted through the chaos, his twin daggers flashing. He drove one into the base of a knight's spine, twisting hard before vanishing into the shadows. "Torin," Braxis roared, "we're getting overwhelmed." Torin's eyes narrowed. "We need the artifact, now." "Kale, get to the altar." Kale darted through the chaos and sprinted towards the raised platform at the far end of the hall. The artifact rested atop a pedestal, an obsidian orb pulsing with faint crimson light. "Don't touch it," Elira shouted. "Do you have a better idea?" Kale shot back. The skeletal lord turned towards Kale, raising its sword. "You will not leave this place." Kale's eyes flashed gold. He dove forward, grabbing the orb, and the moment his fingers closed around it, the entire keep trembled. Cracks split through the stone beneath their feet. The knights screamed as crimson energy erupted from the orb, swallowing them in a tide of shadow and light. "What did you do?" Torin shouted. Kale stood, his hood blown back. Eyes burning with golden fire, he turned towards the others. I think I just woke something up." A deep, guttural sound rumbled beneath their feet. A single red eye opened in the stone beneath them. "Run! Now!" Kale shouted. And without hesitation, Torin grabbed Elira's arm, pulled her to her feet. Braxis raised his hammer, diving it into the floor as the ceiling began to collapse. "To the gates. Now!" The party sprinted for the exit as the ground crumbled beneath their feet. Just as they crossed the threshold, the gates slammed shut behind them. The keep trembled and then fell deathly silent. The orb in Kale's hand was no longer pulsing. It was dark. That was not the plan, Elira breathed. Kale's hands trembled. It wasn't a curse. Then what was it? Torin demanded. Kale's eyes darkened. A seal. Braxis frowned. Then what did you just release? Kale smiled grimly. I guess we're about to find out. Smoke curled from the shattered remains of Hollowspire Keep as the adventurers stood in the fog-choked clearing beyond the gates. The orb in Kale's hands was no longer pulsing with crimson light. It was in fact lifeless. But the dark presence lingering in the air suggested that whatever had been sealed inside the keep was no longer being contained. That was not the plan, Elira repeated, breathless. Kale's hood looked down, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from sweat. His amber eyes were wide with something between exhaustion and terror. No, it wasn't. So what exactly did you release? The artifact wasn't a source of power. It was a lock. A lock for what? Braxis spat back. Something old. Something angry. Right, Torn growled. And how exactly are we supposed to deal with something old and angry when the thing that was keeping it locked away is now in your hands? We leave it behind, Elira said, dusting herself off. We're not getting paid enough for this. We can't, Kale said flatly. And why not? Kale held up the orb. Thin cracks now spider-webbed across its surface. Faint red light pulsed beneath them like the last embers of a dying fire. Because it's not done with us. A low growl rumbled through the ground beneath their feet. A cold wind swept through the clearing, and the fog twisted unnaturally as the shapes began to form. Dark, shifting figures with glowing red eyes. What is this song? Hold on. Sorry about that. It wants the orb, Kale said. Then maybe we should give it to them, Torrin muttered. Yeah, sure. Let's just hand over the cursed artifact and see what happens. You know, I'm always open to suggestions, Torrin shot back. The nearest shadow lunged. Torrin ducked beneath its outstretched claws and drove its sword into his chest. The creature screamed, dissolving into black smoke. Another leapt at Elira, but she rolled beneath it, her daggers flashing as she tore through its spine. We can't fight them all, Braxis roared, slamming his war hammer into the ground. Holy light flared outward, scattering the closest shadows. Kale, what's the plan? Kale's eyes were unfocused, his breathing shallow. The orb pulsed faintly in his hands. It's calling to them, Kale said. Then turn it off, Torrin shouted. You think I haven't tried that? Another shadow lunged toward Kale, its claws inches from his throat, until Elira's dagger flashed through the air, embedding itself in the creature's forehead. Less talking and more surviving, Elira shouted. Kale's gaze sharpened. He gripped the orb tighter, his amber eyes flashed gold. He closed his eyes and focused on the pulsing energy beneath his hand. It's not the orb that's the problem, Kale said. It's what's inside it. And, Torrin demanded, I need to let it out. I'm sorry. What? Kale's eyes opened, burning with golden light. It's trapped. But if I don't release it, if I don't direct it, it's gonna tear through us. Braxis's expression darkened. And if you do release it, then we might stand a chance. How long do you need? Buy me 30 seconds. You heard him. We hold him off. Hope you know what you're doing, Elira said. I don't, Kale admitted, but I'm about to find out. The shadows surged forward. Torrin charged, his sword flashing in wide arcs. Elira ducked and spun between them, her daggers carving dark trails through shadow and smoke. Braxis raised his hammer, driving back the wave of darkness with bursts of divine light. Kale knelt in the center of the chaos, the orb cradled in his hands. He closed his eyes and focused. The energy inside the orb whirred beneath his touch, wild and sharp, like trying to grip a blade. It was alive. You're awake now, I can't hold you anymore, so either kill us or help us. The orb pulsed violently and then shattered. Light exploded outward in a wave of burning white energy. The shadows screamed as the light tore through them, reducing them to ash. Kale stood slowly, golden light swirling around his hands. His eyes were no longer amber, they were in fact molten gold. A figure floated above him, a creature of light and shadow, its form flickering and shifting between shapes. "You woke me," the creature said, its voice echoing like 1,000 overlapping whispers. "Yeah," Kale said, "and now you owe me a favor." The creature's eyes narrowed. "A favor?" "Destroy them." Kale pointed at the remaining shadows. The creature smiled, a sharp, predatory thing. "With pleasure." Light erupted from its form, searing through the remaining shadows. The air trembled as the last of the dark creatures evaporated. Silence followed. The creature turned toward Kale. "Our business is not finished." Kale's golden gaze narrowed. "It's never finished." The creature dissolved into light and shadow, fading into the thin air. Torrance stumbled forward, panting. Did we win?" Braxis grunted. "Well, we're not dead, so close enough." Elira walked over to Kale. His eyes had returned to amber, his hands trembling. "You okay?" she said. Kale smiled faintly. No, I'm not." Torn groaned. "Well, that's reassuring, I suppose." And Braxis shook his head. "Well, whatever you pulled out of that orb isn't gone. It's watching us now." Kale's smile darkened. "Good. We can use an advantage." Elira's eyes flashed. "So what now?" Kale lifted his gaze. The shattered remains of the Hollow Spire keep. "We find out what that thing wants. And then we make sure it knows who it's dealing with." And thus ends the second part of the Curse of Hollow Spire Keep. Now, normally we run our streams like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, but I haven't given my voice enough time to rest, and it's starting to actually like hurt. So I'm gonna cut stream here, and we'll pick this up on Friday instead. So we'll skip tomorrow's stream and pick it up on Friday, just so I can have a day to just rest my voice. It's actually crazy, like talking in a lower tone is actually more strenuous than yelling. As much as I love reading these stories to y'all, I have to chillax just a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed these stories and the small positive affirmations as of right now. We'll pick this up this Friday at 4 to 6 p.m. Central. My name's KittehKun, your favorite storytime reader. Read 50 Shades of Grey, I got you. I got you, baby. My name's KittehKun, your favorite storytime reader, catboy. I no longer have a cheeseburger on my head, and I wish you one good hell of a Wednesday. Have a good one.